My name is Stefan Hoffmann. Your session is Demystify HANA Cloud Services. What I'm going to go through is first explain you what are the trends and challenges in a data-driven world, and then what our strategy is with how we want to solve them or address them with SAP HANA Cloud Services. SAP HANA Cloud Services is at the end the umbrella for 3 individual services that we offer. Some of them are already available since a few years, which is SAP Analytics Cloud, but with now SAP Data Warehouse Cloud, that is where I am coming from. I'm product manager for SAP Data Warehouse Cloud. That is our newest kid on the block. And we also bring, in November, we bring the new code line from SAP HANA Cloud. And I'll talk you through those, how they connect together. And at the end, I summarize the whole presentation. So what is HANA Cloud Services? So HANA Cloud Services, the technologies that are in place, we talk about HANA Cloud itself as the storage, so to say, and federation engine to run your powerful applications on top and to connect to those distributed data sets that you have in your organization. In the middle, you see Data Warehouse Cloud as the component that helps you to then structure the data in a way that you harmonize the records, bring it together to build a solid data foundation that is understandable for business users in a way that you have then the abstraction, so to say, in between the underlying data layer and the semantic layer on top, so that people can easily consume the data that is available in your organization. That aspect is coming through Data Warehouse Cloud. And then on the last piece, then once you have data stored and managed and ported together and cleansed it in a way that and translated it in a business semantical knowledge, so to say, then that you want then to leverage it in business intelligence applications, planning, or in predictive applications. So that the answer for that is SAP Analytics Cloud, where we focus then more on the visualization part of that data. All those 3 components together, they build SAP HANA Cloud Services. They can be, so to say, used in use cases individually, but we think the whole story with SAP HANA Cloud Services, the value that we can create by now connecting these individual services, that is the value of the HANA Cloud Services. So instead of giving you now a hodgepodge of individual services where you then have to connect those services, we bring under the umbrella term SAP HANA Cloud Services, we bring those individual services that we have together so that it's for you a frictionless experience. So let's start with the first component. What are the new things with HANA Cloud? So with HANA Cloud, we bring the functionality that we have from HANA on-premise, we bring that functionality into the cloud. What is this functionality? So embedded in HANA, we have the virtualization layer. The Smart Data Access, Smart Data Integration that allows us to connect to any source in your organization. So we can leverage that capabilities to connect now to either on-premise systems or to cloud systems. What people ask us, what customers expect from us is, you have invested on-premise in SAP solutions, and for sure there's a clear need for it to connect to those sources without getting the data over into the cloud. And we address this with the virtualization capabilities that we have in HANA Cloud. So what we can do with this virtualization capabilities, we connect to the underlying sources, and at the end we can cascade, so to say, in a way that once we access those sources, we can cascade it in a way that we first bring the data in without having any persistence, and caching the data once you access now the pointer to this underlying system. So if this caching itself, if that doesn't provide the service level agreement that you expect from the underlying source, what we then can do, we can bring the data into a persistence layer. So seamlessly, we can switch between a federation and a persistence. Why is this so important? Because applications that now are built on top that leverage now a data set that is now established by such a virtualization capability, they don't have to change. So we with HANA Cloud, what we bring into the software is that HANA Cloud itself can switch in between those layers. For the persistency, we can either offer you then the data in a way that you, for very valuable data, we can put that into in memory, or we can cascade that down to on a disk level. So that is what we bring now with HANA Cloud. We bring you the capability of the native storage extension, so that allows us to address much more volume in a single node than you can do it with a HANA on-premise that is bound to purely being on memory bound. So, and what we also do is we embed in HANA Cloud, we embed a relational data lake that allows us then to address petabyte scale data. I come to these details later. So what customer also expect, or what we want to deliver is, with HANA Cloud, as we translate that or shift the HANA core functionality into the cloud, people expect, of course, that we can leverage the scalability and the elasticity that comes from the hyperscaler, that we can leverage that also with HANA Cloud. And that's exactly what we are going to do. So we deploy the solution using a Kubernetes-based approach, so then that we can then easily scale up and scale down the solution depending on your needs. That is something that on-premise is currently not feasible with HANA. So we bring that now in the cloud. We change the code line and brought then those functions into the core that you can easily scale up and scale down the solution. Itself, HANA itself can be used with the multi-model model that is available in HANA to not only address OLAP and OLTP workloads, but also no matter in which format your data is available, either in SQL relational form or in a document form or in a spatial graph form, you can use this multi-model capabilities of HANA to expose the data that you are accessing through a single interface to the application consuming on top. And that is what we think simplifies the whole landscape, because you don't need to take care, once you talk to the data, how it's structured in the underlying system. So HANA exposes the data that is sitting in those systems through this multimodal capabilities in a way that you have a SQL interface that you can run against it. What is now this elastic scale that we bring to the software? As you see on the left side, a lot of systems on-premise are currently scaled in a way or configured in a way that they are configured to the peak load. And what customers do, just they don't configure it only to the peak load. They put in a lot of cases 10 or 20% more compute and storage power to the system, and that leads then at the end to higher costs than expected and to oversized systems. So in that challenge now, customer are now in that challenge that with the offering in the cloud, with the hyperscaler offerings, they see that the hyperscaler offerings in most cases are cheaper. So therefore what a few of those customers do is they offload data from now these powerful on-premise systems and bring that data to now Redshift, whatever you have in the cloud. What we reacted to that, or we understood that message, so that we have to work on the cost side. And what we now can do with HANA Cloud, we bring now the software into the cloud using this elasticity and scalability that now the infrastructure provider gives to us. So what we can do, we bring now logic into the HANA Cloud core that we can analyze your workload patterns. And depending on your workload patterns, we can then spin up additional instances and also then later on shrink them again down, so that your workload pattern, so to say, determines at the end how large the box needs to be. So with this elasticity then built into the solution, we think we can address then this cost aspect in a much more efficient way than we can do it on premise. Also with the functionality that we then have in place, we want to come up with a pricing model that is then in contrast to on premise, not with upfront costs related, so that you where you have to buy your license and buy your hardware on a HANA Cloud side. What we are going to do there is you get at the beginning when we start with it a subscription-based model, so you can go for a subscription and put in, of course, then this elasticity as you need it. And with the time, so in 2020, we will establish a pay-as-you-go model so that you just charge or pay for that what you use. So with the capabilities that the hyperscaler providers provide to us, we think we can address that very well. So how does this look like from the scalability perspective? Let's start at the lower bottom left. So what you can do, coming now from on-premise perspective, I explain it from that angle. What we can do already on-premise is we can scale in and scale up within a single node, compute and storage power of HANA. So once you reach the server limit of memory and compute, what you can do, you can then go to the upper right corner where we can have a uniform scale-out solution where you add just additional nodes to it. And with this the adding of the additional nodes means you get then the compute power and more storage power again to your HANA system. We call that the uniform scale-out. And what you can do, you can place now the individual tables to that nodes and distribute them across the nodes. With this MPP architecture, we can then scale into sizes that are in the 100 terabyte space. So we have already customers that do that today, that scale in that size. Now, what's new with HANA Cloud? So those two things are already possible on-premise. What's now new with HANA Cloud is what is illustrated in the upper right left corner. So in the upper left corner, what we can do, we have a functionality that we call elastic scale nodes, where we can add now additional compute power to HANA without being bound to the persistency. So on-premise, HANA is bound with, once you scale it up, as it is illustrated in the upper right side, once you scale it up, it's bound, the index server is bound to the persistency. Now with the elastic scale node, we give up this persistency, the binding to the persistency, and we can now spin up additional instances where you just add additional compute power if you need it. So this is completely new with HANA Cloud. And what we also can do, now go to the bottom right, you can also scale now the data part individually. So what we offer here on that side is with the inclusion of native disk store extension, we can place now data either in memory or we can place it on disk. It's at the end your decision, and the value of the data determines it in which layer the data sits. So is the data accessed very frequently and it's very valuable? Then of course you want to have that in memory, because what you want to have is maybe the sub-second response time. But if the data is now not accessed that frequently and is maybe not that valuable, because you access it only in rare cases, then you can place it on disk. And if you place it on disk, you can decide whether you want to place that in a way that you still use the HANA technology, or you want to use the IQ technology and build and store it in a data lake. With HANA Cloud, we give you this capability because once you go for HANA Cloud, what we can do is, or what we are doing is, we deploy next to the HANA core engine, we deploy you a relational data lake that is based on the Sybase IQ technology. Sybase IQ technology, we acquired that quite a while ago. It's also an MPP installation, so it scales very well across nodes. So it's similar from the overall architecture to HANA. The contrast is it's a disk-based database. And with this disk-based database, what we can now do, we can delegate from HANA the statements directly to this disk-based database in case you want to, for example, load data from a S3. So we have, as it is illustrated on the slide, we have a file loading capability where you can put that combination directly on a hyperscaler storage and then bring in the data that you want to bring in with a high-speed ingestion method. That the file loader that is in Sybase IQ, we have that, as I said, since years, where there are benchmarks available where customer load up to 16 terabytes per day using this technology. So HANA Cloud itself, as I already mentioned it's based on Kubernetes, and this Kubernetes technology allows us that you can then easily spin up additional nodes in case you need now additional database readers or additional database writers. So it scales very well, giving that what I've said before. Now, what does this give you? The graphic illustrates it. So it gives you now flexible storage options. Flexible storage options that you can decide by the data that you bring in, whether you want to keep the data in memory or keep the data on a disk or keep the data in a relational data lake coming from the IQ side, or even keep it in a Amazon S3 blob storage or in a ADLS storage coming from Azure, for example. So with this pyramid itself, you see you can then address different amounts of data. If you want to go into the petabyte or exabyte scale, it is scalable in the volume part. And of course, it's those layers are related with specific SLAs in regards to the performance. So it's at the end a solution where we deploy you the solution connected to it. HANA Cloud itself, how we are developing it, goes into a direction that we bring automation into the software, that we can then, so to say, if we recognize that you frequently access now data sitting in the data lake part, we can then put data into the disk again or into the memory depending on the statistics of the data. We give you this option. So we give you at the beginning, we start with indicating to you what data sets are frequently accessed so that you can take the decision by yourself. But long term, what we want to do, we want to automate the solution completely, that at the end, HANA Cloud decides where the data should reside. So with that, we think we can also give you then, or make the whole thing a little bit simpler. What are the typical scenarios that we see for HANA Cloud? Customer, they can take HANA Cloud, as I said before, with the scale-out solution. What they can do, they can take now these nodes that we can spin up in the cloud and connect them to on-premise systems, establishing, so to say, a logical scale-out. So you can shift now workload to the cloud by spinning up now these individual nodes and connect them to your on-premise instance. What you can also use it for, you might have maybe applications that are talking SQL. So what you can do, you can put those applications on top of HANA Cloud, using HANA Cloud, so to say, as the central store to manage your data, including this integrated data lake. Or you use it just in a virtualized way to use this virtualization capabilities to connect to your individual sources, to then use this, as I described it before, SQL interface to then connect to your individual sources and develop applications on top of it without taking care how is it structured in the underlying store. So this so far is everything offered by HANA Cloud. So what is now Data Warehouse Cloud? Data Warehouse Cloud is now an application that is built on HANA Cloud. When we started to develop that application, our main mission was we want to build a tool that is serving the individual personas that work with the data warehouse. What are those personas? So you find the data modelers, you find the people that use a data warehouse just to consume out of it, you find LOB users that get data out of it and maybe want to wrangle data with the data that they find in the data warehouse. So at the end, we find different personas, and what we wanted to achieve is building a solution that serves these needs of those individual personas. Also, what we wanted to achieve is that with the pre-built adapters that we have using the virtualization layer in HANA Cloud, that we can use those adapters to quick connect to sources and then combine the sources using the graphical user interface that we brought into the software. The whole thing is illustrated in that slide. What drove us is making the stuff easy so that the end user itself can leverage the capabilities of the underlying HANA Cloud without having the need to be an expert in HANA Cloud. So that was the driving force for us, because what we have seen, we have seen that people also, they have a data warehouse in place, that they offload data from this data warehouse and bring then their local data to this offloaded data in a separate instance that they had spin up in the cloud. We think this is something that causes a lot of risks because you have to take care that you fulfill then GDPR rules and access rules. So the governance aspect is something that is really critical. With Data Warehouse Cloud, what we established there, we created something that we call spaces. In those spaces, what the idea and the motivation was with spaces is that we wanted to avoid that people offload data from a platform because of that purpose that they want, as they wanted to bring local data next to it. So we saw it with this spaces concept that we can provide then, that we can give users a capability that they can bring local data together with global central governed data without having the need to offload that. The virtualization capabilities that we have in HANA allows us to do so. Also what we brought into the software, that it is easy to use for LOB users, is we brought the functionality that we acquired a while ago already through the business objects acquisition of the universes into the software. So the universes, if you look what the purpose of the universe functionality was, is it acted as a kind of abstraction layer towards technical data, bringing semantics to the business user so that the business user could easily understand the data. So that is exactly what drove us and what we embedded into the software through this new, easy and intuitive to use graphical UI. What is now this specialty of spaces? Spaces are, from a business perspective, dedicating working spaces that allows them to model, to create data models and data analysis for their specific purpose. Typically, a space is assigned to LOB users, so to give them the freedom, so to say, to bring now their own data to the central governed data that sits in a data warehouse. Why that? In a data warehouse, typically you wouldn't allow a LOB user to load data and change data models because the data warehouse itself serves as the one version of the truth, and to establish that you have to have specific governance rules in place to come to this central harmonized data model. And what you don't want to do, you don't want to risk what you have created, this complex data warehousing architecture. You don't want to risk the stability of that architecture because of somebody coming into the system that doesn't have the knowledge how to work with this architecture. So therefore we created these spaces that allow us now to expose this central governed data to them in a way that they can read the data, access the data per SQL or graphical, but that doesn't give them the possibility to change those data models and change the data. So what they can do, what we think where this plays out the strengths is they don't have to offload data any longer, so they don't have to take care how the data gets refreshed. They don't have to take care who has access to the data because this is all secure and governed by the spaces concept. What is in from an IT perspective for the spaces? You can, with this technology that we now bring to the market, you can now assign quotas to an individual space that allow you to configure how much compute and how much storage does such an individual space is allowed to use. And that, with this possibility, it gives you a central monitoring, so to say, for consumption that also allows you then to allocate costs to the individual LLBs. So that is, we already work with customer, and that is something that customer like a lot because it gives them then the transparency once you configure now your system to see in which area do I have what data and how is the usage of that data for the individual area. What we also want to do with Data Warehouse Cloud, currently we are in a beta phase, but once this is generally available, we want to come up with pre-built content. And the pre-built content is something that we develop by SAP, but not only by us. So what we want to do is similar like we did it in BW. So we come up with all these templates so that you have a quick start once you connect to the sources of SAP. But we don't want to only be exclusive to SAP. We invite also partners to bring in their content onto the platform so that you can then leverage this content that comes from these partners. So we already talked to a lot of them. The colleagues from SnapLogic are in a room. This is one, they sit there in the back. So we work with SnapLogic already. So because this platform has powerful capabilities, and with the now options that we have in Data Warehouse Cloud, what we can do, we can expose an endpoint, SQL endpoint, and then any tool that talks SQL can connect to that endpoint and insert the data of the tool into the platform. If you have now such a tool in place, and you have now already models in place in those tools, and you would like to connect them with Data Warehouse Cloud, this is, so to say, then the way how you can get the data in. From SAP Analytics Cloud, we already have a lot of content, so that is available in the content store, and you can quick start using that and connect that also to then the Data Warehouse Cloud models that are in place. What does this mean in regards now to the landscape? A lot of our customers, they have already solutions based on SAP HANA, like the SQL data warehousing, or maybe BW HANA, BW for HANA, or maybe S4 HANA. So they have a lot of solutions on premise, and now we come with the Data Warehouse Cloud. Does this now mean, is this an additional instance on top that I need to go for, or what is now the value of the whole thing? Why should I go for Data Warehouse Cloud? Basically, what we see is we see typically three scenarios when we talk to customer. Either they want to connect now the SAP Data Warehouse Cloud to their on-premise systems to then bring, as I said before, local data that LOB users want to bring to the data warehouse together with the central governed data that sits in the BW, without giving now the LOB users the rights to access BW in a way that you give them a user in the BW instance. Those scenarios, we call them the modernized data warehouse scenarios. Those are scenarios where you connect now the on-premise systems with Data Warehouse Cloud and bring then additional data to your landscape, putting then a semantic layer on top of it that you then can use to consume in a BI client, be it either SAP Analytics Cloud or any cloud that you any BI client that you have out there. Data Warehouse Cloud is an open solution. I already mentioned with the collaboration that we have with SnapLogic, for example, where we use now tooling that talks SQL to then put the data in it. So typically ETL tools, but we want to also be open towards the consumption side, so that in case you now build your data model with Data Warehouse Cloud, that you can then also use Power BI, Tableau, MicroStrategy, whatever you have on top to consume now of that, what I always call universal data record out of the system, so that you can also connect those tools to it. What we also see, a lot of the cases that we see are those what we would consider under the term accelerate analytics. So typically data marts, where people are looking for now a cloud instance, a software as a service solution that helps them to bring data into the cloud and wrangling it together with multiple sources that they have, either be it on premise or in the cloud. Some of them, so most of our customers have a BW in place. They question then, do I have to replace BW with Data Warehouse Cloud? Our answer at that corner is a clear no, because the purpose that to build now something that you have as you have it today in a BW is with the state of the software that we currently have available simply not possible. We don't have that features in Data Warehouse Cloud to build something like you have it in BW. But what you can start for is to implement a classical data warehouse in a way that you build it using the functionality that is there, and adopt then over the time. So our release schedule is we bring every second week a new version, so that you then with the new functionality that comes into the system also can build a data warehouse. So the last component I want to talk about of the HANA Cloud services is SAP Analytics Cloud. So what is SAP Analytics Cloud? SAP Analytics Cloud, the BI part of SAP Analytics Cloud is already embedded in Data Warehouse Cloud. Data Warehouse Cloud comes with a pricing that we want to bring into the market that is purely based on consumption and on consume and storage. So we will not have an additional user license, but what we will do is we will give you, depending on the size of your installation, give you a few SAC users for free. With that, you can already then go for the visualization, for story building, all these things that are in SAC. But if you want to use SAC full-blown, then what is in there from SAC side, that is the sweet spot of SAC. So it's not a tool that is just focusing on now visualization of data. It is also bringing you planning and predictive capabilities in one tool. So we think with that offering, we can address the needs that you have from an analytical perspective in a way that you can, no matter on which device you are now working and in which user segment you are acting, either be it an executive that wants to work with a digital boardroom, or be somebody that is now looking for an analytical solution that also runs on mobile devices. This is something that comes all embedded in SAP Analytics Cloud. So what's the sweet spot of SAP Analytics Cloud is we brought in SAP Analytics Cloud, we brought machine learning now to the data in a way that people that are not now familiar with machine learning capabilities can leverage now the data in a way that they can talk, so to say, to the system in their natural language. And then what the system can do is the system can then it can respond to your question in a way that it auto-generates you the graphic of the question that you have asked. So you don't need to be familiar with how would I create a graphic. All what you would need to do is formulating your question that you want to ask. So to say, give me the revenue of a specific product in 2018, and then the system would choose the graphic as it would fit the most, and give you then the visualization. That is something that is what is available under the term of search for insight. So what we also offer to you is, SAP Analytics Cloud offers something that we call smart discovery, where you can put once you have now a report, you can set you can analyze any point in the report, either be it a measure or be it a dimension, to then let the system, so to say, find out what is the root cause of that specific value. And what happens behind the scene is that the system generates you, using machine learning capabilities, auto-generates you a story, or generates you additional insight to your data point. Lastly, what we also bring in SAP Analytics Cloud are the smart predict features. So you can train now models with the data that you have in the system, and these models itself help you then to derive now executive plans for that what you want to achieve with your business question, and all that in a way that you don't need to be a data scientist and be familiar with machine learning in a deep way. So once you look, so to say, for the tutorials, you should already be capable to leverage these functionalities. I can show you on the slide what is, for example, happening behind the smart discovery. So in the smart discovery, if you hit any point in your visualization now, what the system does, it generates you this story with the 4 tiles, where you have the overview, you get the influencer, you get the outliers and the simulation. So you can go through this. You can go through these stories, and the system helps you then to explain what is the root cause, so to say, of the data that has been displayed in your graph. The final thing, what is a nice functionality also in SAP Analytics Cloud, is that with SAP Analytics Cloud you can go for collaborative planning. So the planning capabilities that are offered in the product allow you to, no matter whether you do now a HR plan, a finance plan, strategic plan, to combine those plans together in a way that at the end you have a complete new planning experience. Either if you use the functionality of the planning calendar, where you can assign now tasks and have workflow capabilities, or either the value driver where you can now, for a specific KPI that you want maybe now to plan on, go to the influencing KPIs that form that KPI. All these functions are built in a way that the LOB user can handle them pretty easy. With the visual formulas, for example, that is a way where you can completely code-free develop your planning logic in a way that LOB users can do that by themselves. We think with these functionalities that we have in place, you have maybe seen in the keynote from Jürgen Müller, he had this equation of amount times quality times usage is value. What our understanding behind that is either you store, if you use HANA Cloud as the storage to store any kind of data, no matter in which format it is, either in memory, in the data lake, or on disk. You can use HANA to store any amount of data. You can use Data Warehouse Cloud to now connect this data in a way, harmonize it so that you create a high value and a high quality databases for then users on top that can leverage that data. So we think if we do that in a way that the usage at the end is high because you have all these sweet spots in the usage part, that then the overall thing creates a lot of value. And we think that organizations that provide people that consume data with intelligence in the data, as we do it with the smart predict features or smart discovery and smart insights features, that at the end people can then create conclude better decisions, and at the end those companies will outperform. So we think with this combination of those three services under the HANA Cloud Services umbrella, that we have a good answer to these questions, to these typical data management questions that appear around now this getting more and more complicated world where data is distributed in the organization. So with that, I would end